Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? Go and get yourself that wonderful quintessential drink, anything fizzy and exotic, or get yourself something cozy and warm like hot chocolate, because I've got a story tonight that is going to get your gastronomic juices going. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, Harrison's in Portland had been opened for a year in 1992. It was doing a flourishing, lucrative trade. The cosmopolitan, debonair restaurant was booming. People were flooding into the voguish, swanky place every single night to enjoy the wide, varied, extensive array of delicious, delectable, diverse cuisine on offer. It almost certainly helped that the owner had acquired the services of a phenomenal, sensational chef called Anton Baudelaire that had worked in auspicious culinary environments in Asia, Paris and Tuscany. So he knew a thing or two about how to produce authentic, stunning Asian, Italian and French cuisine to appeal to all range of palates, from those who enjoy plainer conventional foods to those who appreciate a more sophisticated, discerning palate. When Patrick Paget opened his distinguished acclaimed restaurant, he knew one quintessential secret that has been the making or breaking of many aspiring restaurateurs throughout North America. That is, a restaurant is only as good as its chef, which was why he searched high and low, scouring North America to look for a chef that had the experience of working in other countries, for he wanted some of his all-American dishes to have a touch of je ne sais quoi to his food, to raise his delectable, unique cuisine to a whole new level. With a chef like Anton Baudelaire, with an ingenious creative flair, this was very easily done. In the beginning, the brand new restaurant in Burnside Street, Portland, had struggled to get the word out about their amazing food. But then a humble little write-up in the Oregonian newspaper by a highly respected food journalist had taken Harrison's to new heights, rather like a young eaglet learning to soar the cobalt blue sky for the very first time in his life, as he navigates the firmament, exploring the sky with his fabulous wings, the whole world now his oyster. This literally meant you had to book a week in advance to secure your table at Harrison's. Patrick was in his early 30s, a very handsome-looking man with golden skin, high cheekbones, a square masculine jawline, distinguished, slight, rather Greek-looking nose, green eyes, and a full head of curly black hair. It would seem his good looks matched his affable, gregarious, warm personality that had won over many of his loyal clientele, who found Patrick to be a warm-hearted, companionable man. Since he'd been a young boy, he had always dreamed of owning his own restaurant. Now his dream had been fully realized, coming into fruition at breakneck speed. Something he had to pinch himself to ascertain that he was actually living his dream, for he never envisaged that his restaurant business would become so successful in such a short period of time. It was literally like he'd been swept off his feet. He had bought the restaurant after he'd come into a fortuitous, providential inheritance from his grandfather, of which he and his sister Leslie had benefited most profitably. Leslie had also bought a restaurant in Portland called Antonio's, which was struggling to break even, which had been a great source of anguish to his sister, who was a highly competitive character. For her, failing in life was not even an option. Unfortunately, Leslie lacked her brother's finesse, gregarious, warm-hearted personality. By contrast, she was an embittered woman, easily inclined to jealousy. She was a year older than her brother, with bobbed dark brown hair, green eyes, a heart-shaped face. She could have been pretty, but the perpetual, disagreeable, jaundiced frown that she wore on her face most days of the week, along with her stroppy attitude, short temper, would easily blow a fuse like a firecracker on the 4th of July, which made her somewhat less attractive to people in general. Even her wary staff at Antonio's distanced themselves from the acrimonious, rather acrid woman, ever afraid that the tumultuous, petulant Leslie Paget might come down on them like a ton of bricks. It was the littlest things that would set her off. she would fly off the handle into an uncontrollable churlish rage, of which she seemed to have no control. It was hardly a wonder she had 2 divorces behind her, as both ex-husbands claimed that they had been swallowed alive by her poisonous fractious tongue, rather like a snake imbibing its prey whole. A waitress accidentally breaking a glass, or the chef burning something in the kitchen, would set Leslie off into an out-of-control liverish frenzy. Even the best restaurants have to brace themselves for the odd accident from time to time, moving on with their lives as it goes with the territory. But unfortunately Leslie did not have the buoyancy and resilience to ride the storm, as keeping your head above the water is very significant in the restaurant business. For indeed you need a steely grit, a resolute passion, an inexhaustible determination to succeed. So a bad mood, perpetual tireless nagging and whinging at your staff, is hardly the perfect recipe for a successful business. It was on a Saturday evening, when Harrison's was fully booked, open for business, that things were about to go horribly wrong for Patrick, on an evening he was unlikely to ever forget, that had the capacity to bring his restaurant crumbling to its knees in a matter of only minutes. Something in all the month of Sundays he would never ever have anticipated or envisaged happening to his blossoming, affluent restaurant, of which he had harnessed so many of his aspirations and dreams. The sophisticated, fashionable restaurant looked sumptuous that Saturday evening. Invariably, it always did. The round tables were beautifully graced with starched white tablecloths, gleaming glasses that had been polished to perfection. They literally sparkled. Then there was the starched linen napkins, the eclectic, tasteful white porcelain tableware, where the food was presented on fabulously interesting square or triangular-shaped plates. The green and gold-striped comfortable upholstered chairs adorned every table, offering both style, glamour, and comfort. Soon the doors of Harrison's were flung wide open for the evening. The Saturday night stream of booked customers was in full flow, all being led to their tables by the smiling, very friendly assistant manager, Shelley Longfield, who, much like her name, was a long, slender woman in her early 30s, with a long face complemented by brown chestnut long hair that she wore pinned away from her face in a knotted ponytail. The ambience in the restaurant was electric. You could hear the rise and fall of people's excited chatter, the chink of plates, the tinkle of glasses, the joyous, exuberant laughter. The waiters were clad in formal black attire, wearing starched linen aprons around their waists. Their service was absolutely impeccable, for they had learnt to make every guest feel special, pulling out chairs for their female customers, placing napkins upon knees. The special starter of the day was yuzu marinated scallops with kumquats and prosciutto. The scallops were dressed in a zingy ginger marinade, while the orange added colour to the dish. The crispy prosciutto provided a bit of savoury crunch, so texture, vibrant colour, incredible zingy flavours had been incorporated into this winning dish. "It looks like another great evening," said Patrick, rubbing his hands with contented glee. He adored his job, was thrilled to welcome some of his regulars to the Saturday night dinner. He was energised by the compliments he received from his customers, loved nothing better than his grateful guests walking away from Harrison's with happy, fulfilled stomachs, satisfied from the gastronomic explosion of nirvana. The waiters on this inauspicious evening, because that is indeed what it turned out to be, were sailing across the gleaming oakwood floor like organised boats at sea, attending to their customers' every need, offering exemplary outstanding service, popping open the wine or champagne, which they placed in silver ice buckets filled with a plethora of ice on a stand at the end of the table. They would attentively fill those thirsty fluted wine glasses with effervescent sparkling wine or champagne. They were bringing steaming plates of delicious, aesthetically delightful plated food to the table. The smells that wafted over the restaurant floor were utterly sensational and magnificent. The sound of sizzling food on plates made many stomachs grumble and many mouths salivate in eager anticipation for what was to come. For indeed a popular choice on the menu this evening was the special of scallops that Patrick was excited about. The chef's creation was marvellous, so he was one of the first to try out the scallops, and by all accounts they were absolutely delicious. But not too shortly after eating the scallops, Patrick felt distinctly queasy. He began to wonder if he actually had a seafood allergy, for there was no way those scallops were off. They received fresh scallops every day from their seafood supplier at the Flying Fish Market, a firm favourite with aspiring chefs in Portland. But his guts began to wrench inside him, as if there were invisible fists boxing away at his belly in a Mike Tyson-like match. He knew something was really off. But before he could do anything to retract those scallops from the menu, drama had already ensued at the restaurant. Let's just say it was the kind of drama that you would love to brush under the carpet surreptitiously and forget it ever happened at all. One rather portly man, a regular happy customer called Larry Cottrow, who was always at Harrison's every Saturday night, considered himself a foodie, had happily tucked into the scallops with gusto, but he got up from the table, staggering like an inebriated, intoxicated drunk, throwing up violently over the floor, to the astonishment and horror of the seated guests, shortly after having eaten the scallops. The offensive, conspicuous, less than desirable mess was quickly cleared up by an attentive waiter on duty, but things were about to get worse, a whole lot worse. Ostensibly a thin woman with a full head of perfectly manicured curly white hair, who looked as if she was in her 80s, got up from the table to go to the ladies, but she collapsed and fainted on the floor, her face going a deathly pale shade. There was a hushed, disturbed silence in the restaurant, as all eyes focused in alarm on the poor woman, who'd only just eaten the scallops. Patrick rushed over to the woman's side, feeling for a pulse. It was incredibly weak. The woman's husband promptly dashed over to his wife, looking at Patrick with wide, frightened eyes, his aged face contorted in an expression of apprehension served on ice. "I've got a pulse," Patrick assured the relieved man. "She is breathing. How was she feeling today?" "Oh, Florence, she's been absolutely fine," said the man. "It was only after she ate the scallops on the menu that she grew deathly pale. She said she was feeling very odd." So an ambulance was immediately called. The EMTs whisked the old lady onto a stretcher with her devoted husband at her side. She was quickly ferried to the North Light Mercy Hospital in an ambulance, sirens blazing, red lights flashing. Word about the scallops spread around the restaurant like wildfire. Anyone who had ordered the scallops stopped eating them at once, happy to have their plates quickly whisked away, while Patrick got his chef Anton to remove the scallops from the menu. But many who had already eaten them were feeling nauseous and ill after the starter. The restaurant quickly cleared as people hurriedly left, rather afraid that they might have fallen victim to this inexplicable food poisoning. This was not the kind of pandemonium or chaos that Patrick desired for a Saturday night. After everything he'd worked to achieve in building up his restaurant, this was not what he wanted to happen. But with his own stomach twisting, churning and contorting, he felt too green at the gills to actually care. He quickly got into his SUV truck to drive to his country residence, about 30 minutes southwest of Portland, in the Willamite wine country, well known for its Pinot Noir, fabulous scenery, and of course slower pace of life. It was a place in later years where he would eventually run a highly esteemed new restaurant. Patrick was glad he'd left the assistant manager Shelley Longfield to close up the place and handle any of the issues concerning food poisoning. He was feeling so terribly sick as he drove through the bright lights of Portland. He couldn't wait to get back home as soon as possible to his loving wife Amber and his 2 10-year-old twin boys, Mark and Peter. It was hard to focus on the road with his forehead sweating profusely, while the bitter taste of bile rose up in the back of his throat. It got considerably worse when once he was bobbing down some of the country roads that were about to be paved in asphalt, as the previous paving had become cracked very badly, so the road began to get bumpy, and the rickety journey made him feel very queasy, as the truck jiggled precariously up and down. Every single bump made the sickness more pronounced. He quickly opened the truck window to allow some fresh air to blow into the interior, offering him some relief. The fresh air helped him to feel more invigorated. He was driving past barns, meadows, farmer fields of vines, wood groves full of dogwoods, vine maples, hawthorns, ash trees and grand firs that penciled up into the dark sky like imposing, masterful giants. It was an inky black night, as is often the case when driving through rural country roads, with no street lights gracing the side of the road, like vertical poles of light. But on this particular road he was driving down, it was unusually tenebrous. It was as if the moonlight had slightly dimmed, while the twinkling stars of the firmament glittered across the sky like opulent rhinestone jewels on a sumptuous velvet evening gown. Normally Patrick would be marvelling at the alluring twilight drive, reflecting on how privileged he was to live in this part of the world, but not tonight. The sweat on his forehead was prolific. Suddenly he knew without a shadow of a doubt that he was going to be violently sick. He quickly drew his car to the side of the road, parking swiftly, making a hasty dash towards a large oak tree on the slopey embankment. He was keeling over on his hands and knees. He began to throw up violently the contents of his stomach. In between the throwing up sessions, he began to pant like a thirsty dog, his stomach twisting and contorting. It was like a never-ending vicious cycle, with only small reprieves, after which he would violently hurl all over again. His tongue tasted as bitter as gall. The back of his throat was burning, while his body had an urgent desire to regurgitate the offending food. It was while he was in the throes of his desperate elimination that he became mindfully aware that he was not alone. A tall, shadowy being only feet away from him was watching him curiously. It was only when the moonlight cascaded over the creature's body that Patrick realised what it was that he was seeing. There was not much he could do about his precarious position, whilst in the throes of a frantic, uncontrollable need to purge up all the contents of his stomach. "Oh my God," he thought, "it's a bloody Bigfoot." It seemed like the creature was transfixed by Patrick, watching him very, very inquisitively, with an incredulous, rather baffled look on his face that seemed to register concern. The creature, Patrick thought, must have easily been over 7 foot tall. He was burly and thick, set like a sturdy tree trunk, with long arms that fell well beyond his knees. The distinctive pyramid-shaped head was low slung upon the shoulders that were broad and very pronounced. The creature had a dark leathery face, with an exceedingly flat nose rather like a pug's, with a heavily wrinkled sloped forehead, high cheekbones, and a masculine-looking square jawline that was scantily bearded. The creature was exceedingly human, so human in fact that Patrick was quite perturbed, deciding emphatically that this anomalous creature, covered with long flowing dark hair, possessed very few primate qualities, was much more like a large, giant, powerful, lofty man. For a very brief moment the Bigfoot appeared to have gone away. Patrick was rather surprised how oddly comforted he had felt in the creature's presence, which seemed rather incongruous when being in the company of such a mighty apex predator. But for some inexplicable, unfathomable reason, he had felt the creature's companionship towards him. Then, to his amazement, the creature returned from whence he'd come, moving towards him, gliding so gracefully, almost as if he was floating on air. At first he seemed hesitant, as if overcome with a sudden timorous shyness and reticence, and then the Bigfoot, suddenly overcome with a stroke of boldness, ambled confidently towards Patrick, who was crouching down on all his fours, waiting for the next explosive episode or convulsion to make him hurl. The Bigfoot, with his huge human-like hands, sausage-sized fingers, and flat nail beds, was offering him some fragrant, spicy, aromatic leaves, one that he recognised to be wild ginger, and others of which he was not acquainted with by any manner of means. The creature indicated to Patrick to chew these leaves. He was rubbing his stomach as if to say that he would feel much better if he did. Patrick obediently began to chew the leaves, some which had a minty taste, others tasted like aniseed, and then, of course, he could taste the wild ginger. Within moments the colour returned to his face. The nausea was swept away so fast. The need to hurl was relinquished. Patrick felt energised and strong again. He stood up facing the Bigfoot, who was looking at him directly through his deep-set dark eyes that were the colour of treacle. For a moment the two of them were staring at each other, locked in an intense gaze, of which Patrick felt a faint stirring in his heart, a warm, soulful connection with this creature. He was perturbed and bewildered that despite how dauntingly huge this Bigfoot was, not for a moment or a fleeting second did he feel even a tiny tinge of fear. But he felt in those brief moments that a friendship had been born. He spoke audibly to the Bigfoot, hoping that the creature could understand or comprehend what he was saying. "Thank you so much," he said, rubbing his stomach appreciatively. "I feel much, much better. Thank you for helping me." The Bigfoot did seem to understand. He nodded at him. Patrick swears that the creature was actually smiling. He believed the creature had understood his words. The creature rubbed his stomach and then pointed at Patrick as if to say, "You are much better now." Patrick nodded and once again thanked the Bigfoot, which seemed to smile at him, while his deep-set dark eyes twinkled. The creature then nodded at Patrick, turned around and glided away, his arms moving backwards and forwards as though he was marching, and then he was gone. As Patrick slipped into the leather seats of his SUV, he marvelled at what he had just seen, and the unlikely kindness of a creature that until now he had never known existed in North America. For a moment Patrick sat back in his truck, thinking about what had transpired, meditating over his encounter, over and over again, as if pressing the remote control of a movie and rewinding it back to the very beginning. He was in no doubt that this encounter would remain one of the most poignant experiences of his entire life, for indeed it had been a privilege and an honour to meet such a lofty, majestic creature. Finally, once he realised he was still parked on the edge of the embankment, he knew he needed to make his way home. Patrick's enthusiasm waned as he remembered the food poisoning incident at the restaurant, and then he became unduly anxious. The very next morning he rose bright and early, taking the bull by the horns with a savvy, prompt initiative. He called the food inspection people to report what had happened at the restaurant the previous night, so the inspectors were ordered to examine the premises henceforth. But the inspection of the premises proved that the restaurant was squeaky clean, with gleaming surfaces and impeccable good food hygiene in the cold storage. The restaurant was authorised by Food and Safety to open for business, but Patrick was terribly afraid that news about the catastrophic poisoning would spread like a wildfire, as inevitably news like this can spread fast, potentially being rather deadly for his restaurant, most especially if a report about the poisoning ended up in the local paper. He sent all the guests afflicted with food poisoning flowers, with a message that he hoped that they would get better very soon, something he was advised against doing by his lawyer, as it was more or less admitting that the restaurant was accepting responsibility for what had transpired. But Patrick did not care. He wanted to reach out to his customers with a profusive apology. In turn, they responded with gratitude, assuring him that they would definitely be returning to his restaurant. Patrick then made a difficult phone call, the most difficult phone call of all. He called up the husband whose 80-year-old wife had been taken to hospital. He was heartily relieved to hear that the elderly lady was making good and steady progress. Patrick was perturbed and flummoxed by the food poisoning incident, suspecting some kind of foul play, so he decided to take the offending food to the laboratory for immediate testing. Patrick called a friend of his called Lucas Jalowski to question all his staff about what had transpired. "I want to get to the bottom of this enigmatic situation," he told his good friend. "Something about this food poisoning doesn't feel right to me. I feel as if something nefarious is going on here. If someone intentionally wants to shut me down, I can't afford to allow this to happen again. It will destroy my business. Those scallops were very fresh. How in the hell did people get poisoned? That is the $101 question I would like you to answer." Lucas had been in the force now for over 10 long years. He was a well-respected officer in his early 30s. Patrick had known Lucas since he was 7 years old. Lucas sat down with Patrick to ask him some questions. "You believe that someone might have deliberately tried to shut you down? Why do you feel that is the case? Well, it's the only conclusion I can reach. I spoke to my chef, Anton. He swears he sealed up the day-old scallops, threw them into the bin. He informed me that he marinated the fresh ones, so there's no reason anyone should have got sick. That's interesting, said Lucas. If anyone was trying to shut you down, who do you think it would be? Do you have any enemies that you can think of? Not that I know of, so to speak, said Patrick, rubbing his hands through his hair. But then again, I have been getting great reviews. Maybe a competitive restaurant out there is trying to do the dirty on me. You know, this can be a cutthroat industry. The green-eyed monster has been known to rear its ugly head from time to time. But there's no one you know personally who would like to put you out of business. No, not that I can think of. But I do have to tell you, Lucas, this whole poisoning thing is rather clandestine. Very, very ambiguous, if you ask me. I've received a sibylline report from the lab, who urgently tested the sample of scallops for me. Would you believe it? The sample tested positive for a poison known as ciguatera, which symptoms include abdominal cramps, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, headaches, muscular aches, itchy and numb skin. So it's food poisoning. Now the thing is, Lucas, you can't get this condition from fresh seafood. And our suppliers only sell us the freshest produce caught the very same day. So something very absurd is going on here. Interesting, said Lucas. This is indeed a nebulous, inscrutable case. My instincts tell me that something nefarious is definitely going on. If you don't mind, I will need to speak to your chef. Go ahead, please do. Lucas was exceedingly impressed with the chef Anton. He was struck by how professional and astute the chef was. He was a man in his early 40s, with a wealth of culinary expertise and experience behind him. What he didn't know about food hygiene was not even worth knowing. The police officer noticed he'd never seen such a spotless kitchen before, with surfaces so shiny you could see your reflection in them. No wonder the food safety had left them a glowing report. I'll show you my scallops, said Anton, opening the refrigerator. I've marinated these in ginger today. They're totally fresh. Is there any way that you could have accidentally served the old scallops? Absolutely not. We serve our scallops fresh every day. Seafood goes off very quickly, especially if it's left warm. I always make sure I bag up the old scallops. I seal them up in a bag and I throw them in the bin outside. Is there any way, Anton, that someone could have possibly removed the old scallops from the bin, swapped them over with the fresh ones? Anton looked befuddled. Yes, they could do that. But why would they? He said, his words petering off, becoming almost indistinguishable. Hypothetically, Anton, if the old scallops had been served, would they give the customers food poisoning? Absolutely, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, especially after being left in the bin for a period of time. They would turn very, very quickly. When you cook the scallops, can you tell if they're fresh if they've been marinated? You can always tell that scallops are fresh, but I will admit that once the ginger marinade is placed on the scallops, if they had turned, you would be very unlikely to know. The marinade of the ginger would mask the smell of the scallops being off. Was there any time on Saturday when you and your staff may have left the kitchen unattended? Not that I can think of. Then Anton's brow furrowed. Oh, yes, I did leave the kitchen for about 45 minutes with my pastry chef, Julian. Where did you go, Anton? This is very, very important. I want you to think very clearly. Well, Patrick's sister Leslie arrived on the scene, said Anton, lowering his voice to almost a whisper. She owns her own restaurant, Anton's, here in Portland, you know. Same name as I've got. Ironic, really. Don't tell Patrick I told you this. But that sister of his is the most obnoxious person I've ever had the privilege to meet. No one likes her at all. I gather her restaurant has a high turnover of staff. People can't stand working for her. She's a real bully. I know a chef who left her after a month. He told me he couldn't put up with her constant nagging and bickering. You see, when you run your own kitchen, the last thing you need is the big boss meddling in your affairs, telling you how to coordinate and manage your kitchen. If you're a professional chef, you don't take kindly to that at all. Unless, of course, the criticism is justified, but it usually isn't. Well, I suppose that makes a lot of sense, said Lucas. So why were you distracted for 45 minutes? Did you run and hide from this dreadful woman? No such luck. But let's not kid. I would have liked to have done. I mean, I was run off my feet in this restaurant with all the preparations. The stocks we have to boil, the sauces, the marinades, the desserts, the vegetables that we need to prepare. So I've got not much time to go dilly-dallying around. Well then, why did you abandon the restaurant for 45 minutes? Well, that bloody woman Leslie. She came inside. She was bossing me and Julian around. Julian is our pastry chef. Excellent, excellent cook. He was preparing chocolate ganache, some coconut panna cottas, raspberry granitas, a tempered chocolate log. He was also making margarita tarts, some salted chocolate donuts, and espresso cheesecake. You see, he works in the kitchen late. Desserts tend to take a lot of advanced preparation, as you can imagine. Please stop talking about food, Anton. You've got my stomach rumbling talking about all those delicious desserts. Since I've joined the force, I've packed on 20 pounds. It's all the doughnuts I can't resist. So tell me now, what did Leslie want from you? She told us she had a surprise for her brother Patrick, an advance birthday present for the restaurant. It was a painting in the back of her truck. The thing weighed a ton. There were 3 parts to it. She insisted we collected them from her truck. Then she told us to hang the 3 on the wall. She brought along the hammers and picture hooks for us. So all this time, Leslie was the one in the kitchen left unattended. That's right. I knew she was hanging around in the kitchen, making herself coffee, very cosy, thank you very much, helping herself to Julian's tart au citron. So she was the only one that had access to the kitchen. That's right. But there was something rather weird that happened, which peeved Julian and me off considerably. What was that? Well, after we hung this gargantuan monstrosity of a picture up in the restaurant, that all literally did both of our backs in, it was so huge. It was divided into 3 parts to create one picture, which we had to align on the wall perfectly. Leslie came into the dining room, shook her head, said no, the picture wasn't right for her brother after all. It looked all wrong in the dining room. Could we please take it down and return it to the truck? I was beginning to feel like a bloody donkey, the way that woman was barking around orders at me. I mean, who does she think she is? I don't work for her. I work for her brother. She told us not to tell Patrick she'd been around. She was going to think of another birthday surprise for him. One more thing, Anton, before I go, said Lucas. Do you have confidence in your seafood supplier? 100%, said Anton. Their seafood is always remarkably fresh. How did your interview with Anton go? Asked Patrick eagerly. Oh, it was very enlightening indeed. Could you tell me a little bit about your sister Leslie, Patrick? Patrick looked puzzled. What has Leslie got to do with this poisoning in my restaurant? She works at her own restaurant. It's called Anton's. Tell me, how would you describe your relationship with Leslie? Well, it could be better. I love my sister. She's my flesh and blood.
but she's not an easygoing character. My wife can't stand her, so of course it has increased the tension between us. It's very important, Anton, that you ask your sister to come over right now, at once."
Before long, Leslie's truck was parked in the parking bay at Harrison's. Lucas watched the portly woman climbing out of her car with great interest. She was wearing a black jacket and matching skirt, with her blonde stylish hair that looked like it had been lacquered into place by an extra hold hairspray.
"So that's your sister," said Lucas, watching the woman from the window, moving towards the restaurant. "That's her," said Patrick. "She had bariatric surgery a couple of years ago. Used to be enormous. She could barely walk. But now she's lost a ton of weight. The bane of her life is now all that loose skin. She had several surgeries to fix that problem, but she now thinks that her scars make her look like a road accident victim. She believes she was better off fat, but I keep telling her that her blood pressure's normal, her diabetes has gone, so there are some things to be grateful for." "I'm of the opinion that the best way to lose weight," said Lucas, "is to eat less. Cutting your body up isn't right. Turning your stomach into the size of a fist is crazy as far as I'm concerned."
"What's this all about?" asked Leslie, stomping into the restaurant like a belligerent bull, being teased by a matador with a red flag. The woman looked far from happy. Her brown eyes began to squint. Her mouth turned downwards into a nasty scowl. Lucas could see what Anton meant, as the woman's aggressive energy field left him feeling more than a little unnerved. "This better be good. And when I say good, it better be good. I'm a busy, busy woman. What's so urgent that it can't possibly wait? Why have you called me out here? I've got work to do." "I gather you were here at the restaurant on Saturday, insisting that the pastry chef Julian and the chef Anton retrieved and hung up a huge picture for your brother Patrick. The amazing thing was that after you had exhausted the two poor men, you chose to take back the painting." Leslie flushed a crimson red. "Well, so what?" she said. Patrick looked baffled. "But I had my birthday 4 months ago." "Well, I must have forgotten," said Leslie. "What picture was this you were giving me?" asked Patrick, looking befuddled. "Well, you know, the contemporary 3-piece work that looks like a large whale." "But that's your prized piece of work at Anton's. Why would you ever give me that?" "I was thinking about it, that's all, but I changed my mind. It didn't look good here at all." "My name is Officer Lucas, Leslie. I'm Patrick's very good friend. I'm investigating the poisoning that happened here at Harrison's, and in regards to some scallops that were off. It's a very, very serious business indeed. People got very badly poisoned. One woman ended up being hospitalized. Her stomach had to be pumped. Now, for a woman in her 80s, that's a brutal procedure, I can assure you of that." "So," said Leslie, shrugging her shoulders sheepishly, "what the hell has this got to do with me? I know nothing about any poisoning. I can't help it if your chef is poisoning the guests. Why is that my problem?" "By all accounts, Leslie, you were the only one left alone in the kitchen for 45 minutes on Saturday, by which time you could have swapped the fresh marinated scallops for the ones that were outside in the bin going off, and you would know all about seafood poisoning, given that you work in a restaurant yourself." "What are you, Hercule Poirot or something?" said Leslie defiantly, her brown eyes evading her brother's questioning look. She brushed a finger over her mouth. "Oh, my God!" gasped Patrick. "You did do it, didn't you?" He knew when his sister was lying. From when she was a young girl, she'd always put her finger over her mouth whenever she was telling porkies. All right, I admit it. I did it. I confess. But you know what? It's because it's not fair. We both opened restaurants together.
Antonio's has been struggling to break even. But you, everything is plain sailing for you, as it always is, Patrick. It's always been like that since you were a little boy. You've always been the lucky one out of the two of us. Everything goes smoothly for you. But for me, my life has been tough. Getting this restaurant off the ground has been tough. What do you think it feels like to open all night, only to get a small handful of guests? But you're booked up for weeks in advance. How do you think that makes me feel? Your restaurant gets amazing write-ups, but my restaurant hasn't even got the coverage it deserves. It's not right, it's not fair. My restaurant is equally as good as yours, if not better. Patrick was furious. So this is what it's all about. You got so green with jealousy, as our business was doing so well. You couldn't bear it, could you? You've always been competitive. You saw my restaurant doing well. You thought you'd bring us down to your level, so that our restaurant would be thrown to the curb, that word would spread like wildfire, that we poisoned our guests, which means our clients or customers would be discouraged from supporting us. You wanted to ruin my business, to ruin my family, to ruin my reputation, to ruin my restaurant. Do you realise your foolish actions could have potentially killed someone? This is a serious business. You could be charged with the intent to harm someone. I'm sorry. I guess I didn't think about what I was doing. I'm sorry, Patrick. Out, said Patrick. I don't want to look at you any more. You make me sick. Do you know why your restaurant failed? I'll tell you why it fails. None of your staff remain loyal to you. You've been through as many chefs as I've had hot dinners. You're always interfering with the way things are run in the kitchen. It's a little like me telling a dentist how to drill my teeth, when I don't know a thing about dentistry. You know nothing about cooking. Some of the chefs you've hired have been dreadful. I've always told you, a bad chef equals bad food, bad reputation. It all goes hand in hand. Take a long look at yourself, Leslie. When do you ever smile? You're always bullying everybody around. Those are the reasons your restaurant can't ride above the storm. It's not rocket science, you know. I'm not going to stand here and listen to this drivel, said Leslie, storming out of the restaurant, dashing to her truck, putting her foot down on the accelerator and driving away as fast as she could. Perhaps I was a little hard on her, said Patrick. I don't think so, said Lucas. Sometimes a few home truths are needed for people to get their act together. At least now you know who was responsible for causing the poisoning in the restaurant. I will leave it up to you as how you proceed, if you want to take this matter any further. That won't be necessary. I can weather this storm. Besides, my sister is still my flesh and blood. Despite everything, I love her. You don't have to like those you love. But my hope is that she may learn a valuable lesson over this episode, that being jealous only drags you down. To cut a long story short, for some reason a journalist had got wind of the truth behind the poisoning in Harrison's, and the report in the newspaper read, "The highly revered restaurants Harrison's in Portland, situated on Burnside Street, with the Green Harrod-style awnings on the outside, owned by Patrick Paget, recently opened a year ago, on June the 20th, 1992, soaring to success within 3 months of opening their doors. It has been getting glowing reports ever since, thanks to the esteemed chef Anton Boulader, who has worked in Asia, Paris and Tuscany. The restaurant had a very unfortunate incident 2 days ago on Saturday night dinner service that threatened to tarnish this fabulous restaurant's illustrious image and exemplary reputation. Indeed, the restaurant is so successful that they are taking advance bookings weeks, sometimes months in advance. The food on the menu is diverse and exciting, suited to please the discerning, sophisticated palate and those who prefer to indulge in standard American fare, cooked to perfection, with dishes on the menu that include grilled calamari with watermelon, olives, goat's curd, crispy vine leaves, followed by roast pork belly with roasted crackling, char-grilled peach salsa and mashed potatoes, followed by vanilla panna cotta with rhubarb and ginger. It was the hors d'oeuvres on Saturday's menu, the special of the day that put Harrison's in the spotlight in an inauspicious way. Yuzu marinated scallops with ginger and crispy prosciutto. It was this menu that threatened to tear the restaurant's reputation wide apart, as multiple guests became violently sick, with serious cases of food poisoning. One 80-year-old woman, Florence Markham, was hospitalised, but is reported to be making an excellent recovery. It would seem the guilty culprit behind the poisoning was the owner, Patrick Paget's own sister, Leslie Paget, formerly Leslie Donovan, who is the owner of Antonio's in Portland, a restaurant that has not yet made its mark. It would appear that sibling jealousy reared its ugly head. Leslie was reported to admit replacing the fresh scallops with the 2-day-old scallops that had been thrown out. As the older scallops had been marinated, the chef Anton was unable to discern that the scallops were not fresh. "I am very disappointed with my sister's duplicitous actions," admitted Patrick, "and of course the distress she caused to so many of my clients. But she is my sister, so naturally I forgive her." When Leslie was asked to comment on her guileful actions, she refused to make any comments. So our advice is for you to feel confident that an evening spent at Harrison's will ensure you will leave having had an outstanding culinary experience. Don't be put off by this unfortunate incident, which Patrick says is exceedingly unlikely to ever happen again. All things considered, and on a final note, I'm very glad to report to you that business at Harrison's continued to boom and prosper. If anything, the food poisoning incident meant that the business skyrocketed to greater success. So maybe there is some truth that there's no such thing as bad publicity. As far as Leslie was concerned, she managed to overcome the green-eyed monster. In the years that followed, Antonio's was doing a great trade. But to date, Leslie has retired from the restaurant business. It would seem that she did learn some invaluable lessons in toning down her aggressive stance towards her staff. As far as Patrick was concerned, if it hadn't been for a bout of extreme sickness, he would not have encountered the hairy man, an experience that has left an indelible footprint on his life. And when we talk about footprints, it's of the very large kind. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.